Welcome to Live with the Author, Bridge to Practice. We're here today with the co-editors, Bob Jimenez and myself, Amanda Goodwin, of Reading Research Quarterly. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Fantastic. Well, we thought we'd have this session to chat a little bit about what is important about RRQ and why it matters and what we're looking for. So,
Right.
Bob, first, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm a professor here in Peabody College, the Language, Literacy, and Culture group within Peabody College Department of Teaching and Learning. I've been in the field now since 1990. I received my graduate degree, my doctorate, and my master's degree from the University of Illinois, where I was a graduate research assistant at the Center for the Study of Reading, working with P. David Pearson, Dick Anderson, and a whole host of other notable folks that have influenced my thinking and my career tremendously.
Super cool. Well, I'm Amanda Goodwin, and I'm an associate professor here at Peabody College at Vanderbilt University. Bob and I both have offices right across the hall, so we are always sharing our thinking, including our thinking about RRQ. So it's kind of a special experience to be able to think together about what's important.
And we do spend a lot of time asking each other questions, especially questions that we don't have the answers to. And it's an incredibly productive kind of interaction when we are working with topics and ideas that are new to us.
And so one thing I want to say first off is one of the most exciting parts about being the RRQ editor is just how fascinating it is to read all of these articles. So a huge thank you goes out to all of the authors who are submitting their work and all of the reviewers who are so carefully considering this work and helping us see how this work can be better. And so one thing that I want authors and folks to note is that we are in your corner, and we really want the manuscript to get better through the peer review process.
And I would just reiterate that idea. The manuscripts that we see are fascinating.
Absolutely.
They provide us with incredible insights into the field of literacy, instruction, and learning. And some of the reviews that we receive from those of you who work with us as reviewers are unbelievably insightful. It's very clear that many of you spend incredible amounts of time working on those, and we appreciate your help and your support tremendously. Thank you so much.
So Bob, one of the things that might be helpful for people is to think about, what do we value? What is the whole goal of our editorship? Why did we accept this?
Yeah. I was just thinking about that as I was walking over here to the studio, and it occurred to me that when I was doing my graduate work, there were a number of key articles that I think had sort of field-changing effects on all of us who are in the field of literacy research and instruction. And I think those are the kinds of articles that we are looking for in particular. And I have in mind, I'm thinking, I was just explaining to one of my classes yesterday, or on Tuesday, I think it was, how when Dolores Durkin, for example, went into classrooms in the late 1970s and found that almost no comprehension instruction was going on within any of the schools where she was collecting her data, how that had a sort of a life-changing impact on the field as a whole. And all of a sudden, there was all kinds of research on what kinds of instruction would actually make a difference in the lives of children and what would actually help them comprehend text at higher levels.
And I think that's such an important point. So we want those articles that are going to be field-changing. Mm-hmm. And part of that, though, is framing the article within the field and making the rationale for the need for the study really clear. What is that addition that is going to change the field? Exactly.
And of course, it's easy to see all of the different parts that a manuscript ought to have, and we are looking for that. But more than anything else, I think sometimes when we look at a manuscript and we get the reviews back from reviewers, I want to see some kind of excitement, both on the part of the author as well as on the part of the reviewers, that this is work that really matters. This is work that is looking at an issue in a somewhat distinctive and different way than has been done in the past, and that has possibilities for changing the field moving forward.
I agree. And I think the other thing that we're also looking for is some implication to practice. You know, it doesn't have to be in that particular study, but the authors need to think about, how is this work meaningful to the larger field and to the larger field of practice?
And why does it matter?
Exactly. I think that's what you need to write with. Like when I look at an article, I want to know why it matters from the beginning, and I want that thread to be weaved throughout. Why is this meaningful work?
Why should researchers pay attention to it? Why should teacher educators who are working with practitioners really think carefully about the kinds of findings and implications of the research that is being presented in a manuscript that is being reviewed for, I guess, publication in Reading Research Quarterly?
Yeah, and things that also matter to us are things that push the field. And so one thing to acknowledge is that we know the field is complex. We get manuscripts from all sorts of topics, which is fascinating, really exciting. Our dinner conversations, at least mine, have changed significantly because we're talking about all sorts of different things. And when we got to the schools, we get to talk about all sorts of different topics. But the complexity is important. And what we really want is ideas and statistics and models that push the field. That are novel. And so even as the field is changing, using the most appropriate method to answer your research question, I think is really important.
And that's probably a necessary condition for a manuscript to be accepted for publication, is that it moves through the review process with at least some kind of enthusiasm on the part of the reviewers. In other words, we want to see that a broader spectrum of folks out in the field feel like this is important work, as well as we ourselves as editors look at the manuscript and say, hey, this does matter, that this does have implications for what the field as a whole is doing right now, as well as what we hope to see happening out in classrooms.
And I think that's an important thing to think about as you're writing. You do want to write for the specific educated audience within your topic, but you also want to make it meaningful to people outside of your topic. Why does this matter more broadly within the field? How does it fit more largely?
And definitely it's necessary to explain the technical aspects of your work in such a way that those of us, or that the field as a whole, can understand and appreciate, because I think a lot of times work that's very detailed and very technical might not be a good fit for Reading Research Quarterly, because the work must speak to the field as a whole. But we do look for work that is very sophisticated in terms of analysis and in terms of research design as well. So that can be a difficult sort of set of parameters to juggle and to think about as you're preparing your manuscript, but it definitely is necessary for something to be published in RRQ.
I totally agree. And I think the sophistication is important, not for just no reason, but because that sophistication helps you answer a more nuanced question. So for example, if they already know that the relationship between two constructs exists in the field, the next step might be to understand, how is it different for different types of readers? And there are things that we look for in terms of describing demographics and the participants that's really important. So when you're describing your participants, make sure we really understand who they are and under what conditions they're learning and living. Because I think we're getting to the point as a field that we're thinking in a more nuanced way about reading and readers and texts and words.
And we're looking specifically for how the research is linked to a theoretical direction, and whether or not the research that is that we are being asked to consider for publication challenges the theoretical framework or adds to the theoretical framework, or confirms the theoretical framework in ways that haven't yet been done previously. I think one of the most damning reviews that I see is when a reviewer returns a manuscript and says something to it or writes something to us along the lines of, I can't figure out how this work contributes to the overall understanding of this particular phenomenon. But when reviewers do see the links between the research that's being conducted and how it moves us forward in terms of our overall thinking, then that's the kind of work that we as editors, I believe, pay very special attention to.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's the kind of work that matters when we're keeping in mind sort of changes to research, practice, and theory as you're writing. I think is a really important piece. You need to know as you're writing why your work matters, how it fits within the larger research, and how it connects to theory, the research that came before it, and how it connects to practice.
Right. And we do see a lot of technically acceptable kinds of manuscripts, but we are always, or at least I'm always looking for what's the extra added value that this work brings to the field as a whole. So if it's just good research, it might not be good enough for RRQ, because RRQ, I think, maintains a very special position within the field of literacy research as a whole. And that can be sometimes a little difficult to communicate to folks who are submitting their work for publication, that this has to go one step beyond just good work. It has to go to a level that's recognizable to the reviewers as well as to us as editors as something that's special.
And to the field. Yeah. And we hope that we're not the ones to have to figure that out. It's really nice when the authors lay out what is that special conception, what is that special consideration, and how is this moving the field forward in really important ways.
One of the comments that I get sort of repeatedly from reviewers is this work is not quite at the level that RRQ expects. In other words, I think there's a broad understanding within the field that RRQ maintains a very special status and position within the field of literacy research. And so my sense is that the standard of excellence that RRQ works hard to maintain, and I think continues to maintain, is something that we as editors feel a very special responsibility to think about continuously as we do our work.
Absolutely. I think that's at the forefront of my mind as I'm reviewing. You know, what is special about this manuscript? And at the same time, it might have something special, but is it technically sound? Is it using the most innovative, the most trustworthy analyses, the most trustworthy measures? So
yes, I would agree. And since I'm very much interested in qualitative research and ethnographic research, looking at literacy instruction and literacy learning and kinds of literacy practices that students from both mainstream as well as non-mainstream populations engage in, I think it's particularly important to think theoretically about the work and how the work might move theory forward in terms of the theoretical development that is being presented as part of the research.
And I think that's something to really think about as an author, and to know we value all research methods. And so things come across our desk from every side. You know, we have an ethnographic study, we have a latent transition analysis, we've got all sorts of things going on. So we want authors to understand that we value every method. What we truly value is that method aligns with the research question. And so that is the best method to answer the research question. And the way that research question is answered can inform theory and can attend to nuances that are key.
I would agree.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys so much for having us. Just so that you know, Bob and I are really excited to be editors. We put a lot of effort into it, a lot of intellectual thought into it. And at the end of the day, we are so grateful for all of our authors and all of our reviewers. It is you guys who make RRQ the journal that it is, and the journal that can hopefully move research, theory, and practice forward.